Bwana Devil from 1952, the first 3D movie ever made. Well, not really. The first color one, or the first Hollywood one, maybe, or something like that. Although 3D films had occasionally been made prior to this one, indeed, 3D has been explored in some fashion as early as there have been cameras, but Bwana Devil is generally credited as being the first 3D movie for a variety of reasons. It's certainly the earliest surviving full-length 3D movie. The back cover on this disc credits it as being the first feature-length color 3D stereo movie, but I think it might be best described as the first trend-setting stereo movie. It's the first time that 3D changed the direction of the movie-going experience. From my perspective, there have been 3 such movies to date. Avatar for the modern era, Coming At Ya for the 80s, and Bwana Devil, setting fire to the 50s. Now, Devil is a little more unique than the others in that it had no immediate predecessors. Leading up to Avatar, IMAX had been showing 3D regularly for at least a decade. Prior to Coming At Ya, there were occasional films using a single camera method, which was introduced with the bubble in 1966. But before Bwana Devil, there really wasn't anything brewing in the immediate decade, if not 2 decades, that was accessible to the general American public. There certainly wasn't a camera built for the purpose. Now, as a quick disclaimer, there did exist a single 3D theater in Moscow that opened just before World War II and reopened after, surviving well into the 50s, showing locally produced stereo films. It never grew beyond that single theater, and I could not find anything that suggested it had any international influence or that anyone outside of the area even knew it existed. So details aside, Bwana Devil certainly brought 3D to Hollywood, which for the last century has been the world's chakra of communication. But how does it look? Surprisingly, it goes easy on the 3D ham. It rarely comes right at you. And although separation is generous, the composition is careful not to abuse your eyes. It does have shots with busy backgrounds that can be challenging to view. I noticed, especially during the clever stop-motion opening, that my eye was sometimes trying to resolve the busy leaf foliage in a way similar to what you might find with those magic eye stereograms. If you're not used to old 3D, you may have to occasionally consciously tell your eyes to ignore the background to enjoy some of the closer moments. But in a curious way, that is kind of a nod to how crystal clear this Blu-ray is. In many shots, there's no obvious color difference between the left and right eye. At times, the clarity is so good, it might have passed for a modern digital movie. Not all the time, but enough to make for a very impressive viewing. Even if you were to watch this flat, it just has a great picture. There are a few, and I mean very few, shots that seem to be either slightly out of sync or have some minor alignment issues, such as this lion that has a different mouth position in the other eye. At other times, I noticed the odd background element, usually something minor like a branch here or there, that my mind couldn't quite decide where it belonged in the space. I wondered if this was something akin to the pareidolia effect or an alignment correction which couldn't account for every detail in the frame. Who knows? But for the most part, I reiterate my first surprise that there is very little 3D ham and that this is 3D played about as safe as you could play it back in the 50s. The location is largely out in the open. We tend to see things in open field. Actors keep a respectful distance from the camera. There are few obstructions to our stereo viewing. I was also pleasantly surprised to discover that it's telling a serious story. I always imagined that the tentpole banner of first 3D movie would be something of a clown-filled circus, and its brief pre-show introduction, which included a nice stereo shot of the camera used, gave the impression that that was exactly what I was about to be seeing. However, like Avatar, and even like The Hammy Coming At Ya, it chooses to tell a serious movie, a deadly serious movie. There is nothing intentionally played for laughs. I say intentionally because there are some technical limitations that look silly by today's standards. This might lead a picky viewer to dismiss the whole thing as a farce, but I think most viewers are capable of playing along to the movie's intention, which is something of a horror movie. An example of the technical limitations are the day-for-night shots, which are so bright that I often didn't realize that it was nighttime until the actors pretended to be blind and lit lanterns to see. Filming anything dark on film is difficult at the best of times and really wasn't possible until the advent of digital, let alone on an experimental 3D camera back then. I also found many of the animal attacks were a bit too playful. Some unconvincing use of stuffed dolls didn't do much to dispel the scent of cheese. But again, it wasn't so overwhelming to kill the story. As seen in many of 50s fare is the use of rear projection and various flat nature stock footage, which always sticks out like a sore thumb in 3D. Ignoring the lack of stereo, I thought the stock footage was used in a very skillful and clever way here. It wasn't merely background, but interacted with the story beats, leaving me wondering if converting these flat moments into stereo to integrate with the rest of the picture would create a more satisfying experience. Of course, that wouldn't be preserving, but remaking the past, though, as it is with many of the 3D archive titles, we are already seeing an idealized version of yesterday that often is in better condition than it was in its day. As a story, it is very similar to The Bubble, which was made by the same director, Arch Obler, in that it introduces a great horror, and then we watch our characters live under the shadow of that horror. With The Bubble, I felt that life under the shadow became meandering, and frankly, it lost my interest. Here, I feel Robert Stack does wonders as an actor, and his expressions of horror and agony kept the tension going. I did feel it was missing a beat, and the ending seemed, frankly, a bit abrupt, but it was not nonsensical, and I never felt the movie was going nowhere, so it wasn't that bad. The movie is a historical milestone that would be worth visiting for that alone, regardless of quality or entertainment. Fortunately, we get all three. This devil is worth knowing.